Now, before we get into that letter, I want to play you something that the Attorney General of Minnesota just now said. This is Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison is the guy that used to be in Congress. He's the guy that denied that he was a close associate of Louis Farrakhan, even though he was. He was involved in the Million Man March, even though he denied the extent of his involvement. This is a guy who's not afraid of yelling and screaming racism. Okay? Here's what he just now said about the Derek Chauvin trial. Listen to this.
Was this a hate crime?
I wouldn't call it that, because hate crimes are crimes where there's an explicit motive and of bias. We don't have any evidence that Derek Chauvin factored in George Floyd's race as he did what he did.
You hear this? We have no evidence that Derek Chauvin factored in George Floyd's race when he did what he did. Why are people out in the streets? Why are people like Maxine Waters saying things like this?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
Do you think Maxine Waters believes that Derek Chauvin was motivated by race? Hell yes, she does. That's why she said what she just now said. Here you have Keith Ellison saying zero evidence that whatever happened because of race. How many times have I been telling you this? The jury in the Trayvon Martin case. I should call it the George Zimmerman case. The ones who spoke said race never came up. Wasn't a factor. Here you have the AG of Minnesota, the one who brought the charges. No evidence that Derek Chauvin was motivated by race. Then what are we talking about here? Why are people in the streets? How many times have I said to you, what is the evidence that whatever happened because of the race of the civilian? Especially when more unarmed whites are killed every year than unarmed blacks. Especially where study after study after study has shown that the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to use deadly force on the black suspect than the white suspect. What is your evidence that whatever Derek Chauvin did, and he was found guilty of 3 counts, was done because of his race? None. And here we are in the streets talking about defund the police. What is your evidence that when Jacob Blake was shot those 7 times, that's the one in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that it happened because he's black? What's your evidence that Breonna Taylor, the one who was killed in Louisville, Kentucky, when the marshals were serving that warrant, her boyfriend shot at the door? Remember that? What is your evidence that she was killed because of her race? None. And here you have all of these people in the streets, all of these politicians, Maxine Waters yelling and screaming. And here you have Attorney General Keith Ellison, no stranger to whipping out the race card, believe me. Otherwise, he said we were charged with a hate crime. There was no evidence. Then what are we talking about here? Then why are you talking about systemic racism on the part of the police? Why is what happened to George Floyd Exhibit A of the alleged systemic racism on the part of the police when you have the AG who brought the charges saying there was no evidence that whatever Derek Chauvin did, he did it because of George Floyd's race?
Was this a hate crime?
I wouldn't call it that, because hate crimes are crimes where there's an explicit motive and of bias. We don't have any evidence that Derek Chauvin factored in George Floyd's race as he did what he did.
You could have charged him with a hate crime under Minnesota law, and you chose not to.
Could have, but we...
It's called lack of evidence? How many times have I told you, the Obama administration, when Freddie Gray was killed, we're going to go in there, we're going to investigate whether or not any civil rights violations were broken. They go in, no charges filed. Eric Gardner dies. We're going to go in there, we're going to find out whether or not the civil rights of Eric Gardner were violated, says the Obama administration. No charges filed. Tamir Rice The 12-year-old who had the replica gun in Cleveland. We're going to go in there. We're going to find out whether or not the officer violated his civil rights. No charges. You know why? Because there's no evidence. Why are you out in the streets absent any evidence that Derek Chauvin did what he did to George Floyd's race?
Only charge those crimes that we had evidence.
All because of this bogus, fake narrative that the AG has just admitted is bogus and fake. 888-971-SAGE. I am Larry Elder. Do not leave town.